will talk to you afterwards, because I do want to talk to you about The Wire, and I want to talk to you about Walking Dead, I want to talk to you about lots of things.
Sure.
The guys who do anime voices, who do the voice acting, if you had to explain anime to somebody who has never watched anime before, could you sum it up for me in one sentence? Eric, I'm going to start with you.
Maybe not all anime, but at least Pokemon.
Sure.
I call it cockfighting for kids. Because that's what we do. We train the animals to fight each other, but with a wholesome twist. I don't know what you guys call it here.
No. It's I agree. Kira, how about you?
This is a reference to my favorite show, so I'll see how many of you get it, but I think it also describes anime perfectly, a bizarre adventure.
And DC?
Oh gosh, I'm still working on the answer, but because mine has something to do with like inverted teen angst with LSD and mythology.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Wow. Oh, that landed beautifully.
Oh, yeah. In terms of, I'd say, kind of, how would you say, Western animation compared to, anime. As a voice actor, is there much difference?
Are we going in order like this? Or jumping in? Okay. With the adaptation stuff, sometimes we have to tweak it so that it becomes a little more generic. Obviously, you guys are all familiar with Brock and his rice balls and jelly donuts, right? And people are like, why'd you change that line? I said, well, we did it because when we then relicensed the show to other countries, we wanted the food product to not be specifically Japanese, because more people probably eat jelly donuts than sushi. So that's why that was done that way. With a lot of the Western animation, we're not doing adaptation. We do prelay. We record the voices first. So you have a little bit more freedom as an actor, and also the script can sort of be a little bit more loose. But with the animation, we also have to, with anime, we have to match lip flap as well.
Yes.
So yeah, that's the biggest difference for me.
The other is also with the animation, U.S. animation, is that a lot of us can be in the same room at the same time,
Sure.
so we can act off each other, which is a really much more organic process. Whereas with anime, it's so technical. And it's kind of funny because in some ways the pay scale's inverted. It really should be. You should get a lot more money when you're doing anime than when you're doing just Western animation.
Yeah, of course. How about you, Kira?
I mean, I think these guys covered it pretty well. In anime you have a lot more timing restrictions because the animation's already done and they can't change it. And also you're going in to record your lines individually, so you're not playing up the other actors. But I think overall with Western animation you do have more freedom, as Eric said, because you can kind of play around with it. You're not restricted on the timing, but at the same time it's also challenging in the sense that you have to imagine the entire scene in your head. With anime, it's all laid out for you. You see the scene, you hear the background music, you many times hear what the original actor did in Japanese. So I think they're just kind of two different things.
Only if they want to punish you.
Seth, for you, I know you haven't done voice acting before. Has that been a conscious decision on your part not to do it, or is it just a case you just haven't been offered it?
I just haven't been offered it.
Do you foresee yourself doing it in the future? Hanging out with these guys, has it made you anyway invigorated to try it on?
In the 30 seconds you've had with us.
I didn't know. Sorry.
Incredible impression has been left, and now I want to change the course of my career.
There you go.
No. I think, as with anything, it should be left to professionals, and at this point, I would probably just be mucking up the water.
Oh no.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. I guess all four of you play very kind of, I guess you would say, recognizable characters, the characters that you're immediately identified with. You said obviously Walking Dead, you guys, Pokemon, all that. I suppose my question is do you personally feel, and I don't want to say ownership because that's not the right word, but do you feel a connection with the character that you're most identified with, or is it a case of like, no, that's a separate person, that's not me, that's not who I am, that's not what I do?
I am not a fucking priest.
Well, I got that.
So I have some distance between Father Gabriel and myself. I am very proud of him. I do love him, but it's not the kind of thing where people just recognize me as Father Gabriel.
Sure, of course, yeah. How about you guys?
And he does a fantastic job. I'm actually a fan of his.
Yeah, no, God.
Yeah. Well, I think with any of the characters that I play, I try to bring something that Eric can bring to these characters. I mean, they are not me. I mean, but I can definitely relate to being like Brock, the teenage boy in high school that is distracted by shiny things, which are girls. So that's part of the personality there. And James, the sort of the upper crust kind of blue blood. I went to a private school that was kind of really hippy dippy, and we used to play sports against this, like all of the obnoxious schools in New York. And those were the guys that we played sports against, all of those guys that spoke like this. And so, you know, I'm bringing something to it that I think I know. But I've also been proposed to as Seto Kaiba. I mean, I've had people that think that that's who I am.
Yeah.
And, you know, as actors, you know, we're portraying these roles. It's a little different. I mean, with Seth, it's like you see him and you see him in character.
Yeah.
Me, you hear me and then you see a visual. So to think I'm a two-dimensional cartoon is hard. But I think as actors we feel like we might not be owning those characters, but it would be different. It would be a different performance if another actor played that.
Sure. How about you guys, Kira and DC?
Well, I think there's definitely parts of my characters that I can relate to, especially if I'm acting as them, because even if the choices those characters make aren't choices that I would make personally, you know, we can all like kind of get in their heads and feel for their journey. I play a lot of mean girls, and I'm not a mean girl in real life, I'm more just very awkward, but I definitely have a lot of fun playing those types of characters. And as far as like feeling a sense of ownership or this or that, I think especially when a lot of the media that I've done, the characters were voiced in another language first, I feel like fans kind of consider that the true voice of the character in a lot of instances. So, you know, a lot of times I'm like, well, I'm just the English voice.
How about you, DC?
I can never do the ownership thing on it, because the one voice that I've done that has brought me the most fans is Albert Wesker, Resident Evil video games, and that's been voiced by 3 other actors since the 90s.
Right.
And everything that I do about that voice is an amalgamation of their stuff, a combination of what they've done before me. So I'm always grateful to those 3 guys. So no ownership, but identifying. Yes, I am a megalomaniac, and I am a misogynist, and I want to rule the world.
Good to know. Okay, I guess if you could point out to the group, what is the most unusual scene or line, I guess, you've done in your career? Instead, I'll start with you. Most unusual scene or line you've been given in your entire career? Oh, he's thinking about this.
Yeah. I did a show called Oz, which was on HBO, which was a prison show. And there was one particular line. I'm trying to remember it as it was. It was a prison show, keep in mind.
Exactly. There's no kids here, you're okay. Is there?
Yeah, I think the line was something about, well, if you don't shut your fucking mouth, you're going to find my cock burrowing towards your appendix or something.
So it was a medical show.
So it was like ER then.
Yeah. And I had a very hard time saying that with a straight line, with a straight face.
How many takes did
it took about 10 takes. I could not fix my face to say that with a straight face, and it was supposed to be a threat.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, you're threatening somebody with rape essentially. And I think the director was appalled that I kept laughing at it, but it just seemed like, you know, a very writery line.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, it seems like the kind of thing that you wouldn't just say in normal kind of...
Yeah.
And like, was the problem that the person you were saying it to was breaking? Was it you that was breaking? Was it
It
everybody
was me that was breaking. I was saying it to some guy who was like 6'3" and 225 pounds, and I'm thinking, how is this going to even work if I try to mount this guy? You know. So
I have ideas.
I'm so glad this is after hours.
Yeah.
Eric, how about you? Weirdest or most unusual scene you've ever done?
Well, mine is not actually in one of the shows I was working on. It's actually in a commercial voiceover I was working on. And a lot of times directors are not actors, and they also don't know how to express what they want in anything that an actor can use. But the true test of a professional in this business is this type of story. So I'm doing a commercial, and the director, who's wearing like this full white suit like Mr. Rourke from Fantasy Island, it's very strange, and he's pacing around on the other side of the glass, and he's looking up to the sky, and he's doing this whole thing, and he says, you know, what I'm hearing is, I need you to do it more orange. Now, this is not a commercial about orange juice or fruit or anything like that at all. It was probably about like a phone or something like that, like AT&T or something. And I went, more orange. Okay, hold on. All right, I think I got it. And I read it the exact same way I'd done the previous take, and he was like, exactly. And it's all like smoke and mirrors, but you know, that's the art of it, is that, you know, okay, that was a great way to describe nothing, and yet, you know.
I don't know. You say orange, I think about mounting a really large guy, and
if he had said that to you, that might have helped you get through that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But yes, that was my orange, more orange.
Kira, how about you?
I can't really think of any specific lines, but I've definitely done some interesting projects. You know, a lot of anime, if you're familiar with the genre, has a lot of fan service, and I've definitely done some shows and games that were like about as far as you can go into that line.
Fan?
Oh, sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say, you say fan service, okay, again, because I don't watch anime that much. Can you kind of explain that a little bit? I know I'm the worst person to host anime. I totally get that. Fan service, what do you mean by that? Is this like fan written stuff?
No, as in it's made to like appeal
Oh,
to
sorry,
certain
right,
fans.
yes, sorry, I'm
Breaking
sorry.
the walls so that joke is the inside joke.
Yes, I get it, I'm sorry, I'm very, very sorry.
I voiced a lot of naked anime girls, I'll just put it that way.
Does that change your performance in any way, though, the fact that there's no clothes on?
I mean, the
I'm
way
kidding,
that you
by the way.
voice it.
DC, how are you?
When I do voiceover naked, it does change my performance.
I would think it would, you'd feel more free. Like.
Absolutely, I
Yeah.
booked a Geico campaign that way. So it's funny.
Did you really though?
What's that?
Did you really? Because I know like a lot of like voiceover guys have, you know,
Oh, yeah,
their
yeah, I was-
setups
it was-
at home like.
It was.
yeah.
I don't know if it
I don't
aired.
dub with pants on. My studio's in my house. I walk into the room. I might not have my underwear on, but
that's it. Like.
That's what. There's no one there.
I did, right, exactly. So, and to be honest, I wasn't fully naked. I was wearing underwear because it's a stool and you get kind of sweaty in the booth. Sorry, but I did. I don't think this Geico campaign aired here. It was the Real Celebrities one. It was way back in around 2008 or 2007. And the reason that and then I got popular because I got in trouble with the Tea Party because of some stuff, and it had to do with Geico, and I don't want to go. It was on Fox News for a week.
It was great.
Anyway, but anime, you're talking about like there are all the lines almost in anime sometimes could just go down under that list of the strangest thing you've ever said.
Yeah.
So, but we're thinking about like the most memorable kind of moment or what have you. I'm just going to I'm going to jump to because I'm an on-camera actor who has no one knows who the hell I am when it comes to on-camera because I don't work that often, unfortunately. But I did an NCIS episode where I started out as a gay couple. And then he turns over Russian spies, of course.
Sure.
And so then all of a sudden we have our accents back, and we've got these machine guns. And so I was feeling very manly because I don't get cast at that kind of thing. Only in voiceover do I. So I'm enjoying the gun stuff and all of that. They're running out of time, so there's this whole scene where we have to run up this thing. They're dolling with us, and then we're supposed to throw ourselves up against these concrete gate things. And then shoot around it like that. And that's
okay.
But they didn't have time to do a rehearsal. They needed to go right into shooting it. So they go right into shooting it, and I'm like, I am committed, because I so rarely get to work on camera, so I'm committed to this performance, and we go running up, and it's dolling with us, and it's intense, and we're firing, and we come right up to it, and I slam my body against it, and I didn't realize that they had a faux version of the gate that was apparently 10 feet down the street, and so mine collapsed. And it's like, I guess we keep shooting because they're running out of time. And the feeling is like when I'm on a low budget indie, which is usually the kind of thing I get, it's like they're not losing a lot of money.
Sure.
But on that kind of thing, I'm like, oh God, I'm costing them so much money right now.
They can afford it, it'll be alright. Seth, has any of this inspired you to work naked? Or semi-naked?
It worked on Oz. I'm sure that they.
Do you get is it uncomfortable?
I had a scene in Oz where I was playing a prison guard, so I thought there wasn't any chance of nudity. And suddenly one day I read that there is an officer's shower that my character's coming out of. Now it was February 17th, and I think it was -7 degrees outside. So I basically asked the hair and makeup people to fill up a large bottle with warm water and strategically skeet me.
That's the term for it, skeet?
Yes. And it's like, he needs to skeet me a little lower. And I need more. I need a lot more. And yeah, I step out of the shower. It's freezing cold. I'm not representing my family bloodline at all very well. And I turn to the people and I tell them, you know, I think he was like, go fuck yourselves. It was two racist guards talking about black prison guards, and I come out of the shower and tell them to go fuck themselves, and I'm standing there, and it's a confrontational scene.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I'm dripping naked, and they're fully clothed in their armored things. And I guess the idea was that this character is so crazy he will take people on
buck naked.
Buck naked. That was hopefully is the end of my nudity.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of Googling now.
Yes.
I am, yeah. As soon as this is done, like, I'm looking on
wound up
YouTube.
on some gay German porn sites, and I have a huge fan base. I don't know why. As I said, it was a very cold day.
But, you know,
There was shrinkage, Jerry.
all right, okay.
To scale.
Yeah, completely. Shoot to scale. Okay, I'm going to now throw it out to audience questions.
I have the roving mics and everyone wants to ask a question.
Any takers?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Yeah,
We've been
really.
talking about nudity all day. Please, just take the heat off.
For the voice actors, what voice do you think was the easiest to do out of all your characters, and what do you think was the hardest to do?
I try to pick voices that are not going to burn out my voice, except the hardest voice I did, there's a really awesome show called Dinosaur King, and I play Dr. Z, who basically talks like this and screams the whole time. And when I did that audition, they were like, we want you to work on the show, we want you to play this character, and that would be great. He doesn't speak a lot. He's like, starts the show and ends the show with what they need to do and how they failed. And I was like, great. And like, then it became like monologues of screaming at the top of my lungs. So that was the worst voice. The easiest one is, basically Seto Kaiba is me, right? It's just a little darker. That's all it is, with sarcasm, which is not really a stretch for me either. But yeah, Kaiba's the easiest.
I actually have an easier time when I get to go big and crazy than when I have to be really like pulled back. So if any of you guys have seen Kakegurui Compulsive Gambler that came out recently, I played the character Mary, and she just got to be like insane, and it was so much fun. But then, you know, characters like 2B were honestly harder for me because I couldn't show a lot of emotion, so I had to kind of really reel that in.
Kira and I are in a video game called Nier Automata. Am I saying that right?
Automata, I would say.
Is that like Automata? But
Yeah.
I keep getting corrected by people with PhDs, so I'm going to go with Automata.
Who are watching anime and playing video games.
Yeah. So I play her pod, who flies around with her and gives her information. And that was probably the easiest voice I've ever done, because it's just essentially me doing an answering machine for you. And then I guess the hardest ones would be like Azrael and Blaze Blue, or who's just monster, who like basically wants to eat and have sex with everything. And Garneth in what is that called? Radiant Historia, where they just did a re-release of it. Anybody? Okay, never mind. I'm gonna take it off my resume.
Seth, what's been the most difficult role you've ever had to play?
I don't know that. I think the circumstances in The Walking Dead are bring up some challenges. But I think the most difficult roles that I've had to play have been on stage.
Really, yeah?
Yeah.
Any particular play, like, or?
Othello. I've done Othello twice now. I did it in Boston and I did it in Houston. And each time it presented challenges for me. Mostly with trying to be convincing. It wasn't necessarily the material, so much as what I had to fight against my idea of what a general was like, and had to actually play the kind of general that I could play. Othello, a lot of people would assume that he's not written, it doesn't specify this in the script, but he's usually cast as some massive hulking figure who could snap a neck with one hand. I am not massive or hulking. and it take 2 hands and a foot to get around a neck. So trying to lose the idea of what the character was and playing the character as truly as I could was the biggest challenge that I've found, if that's making sense.
In sense, just actually, you've kind of touched on something interesting there, because Patrick Stewart, as you know, like, was a very famous Shakespearean actor, and like, he was doing Star Trek for so many years, and like the kind of dense language of it, and that's something I think that applies to anime as well. Again, my limited understanding of it, I can see you kind of making the face. But do you think, I mean, doing kind of classical works like Shakespeare, like Othello or Macbeth or whatever, do you think that has, I mean, have any of you done Shakespeare before? I mean,
I am not a face actor or a stage actor. I'm a singer-songwriter, so the live theater part is something that I can relate to, and actually that's something that I do miss being a voice actor. It's fun to work in the studio, it's fun to make it perfect, and it's fun to say, okay, I can tweak this and go back to it later. But to me, what's amazing about being a true performer is the thing that disappears in the ether. I could perform the same song on a Monday night and a Tuesday night, and they're completely different. The subtleties, or a play, it's like, the energy of the audience is also something that's contagious as the people on stage. We pick up on that energy too. And that to me is the art of being a true performer. Yeah. And with technology and obviously doing anime or matching lip flap and things like that, it becomes very technical, and it can also you become very removed from the source, the energy of it, because you can fix it. Think about live theater when someone goes off script, to bring them back into it, to get back on, and that might be the magic of that night. So, that's something that I experience with my band, because there's definitely that going on, but I don't experience that as a voice actor. So I can't say that that's it would be great to do some voice acting in a Shakespearean way. Yeah. But and also I just want to say one last thing about playing a role that's been established. Yeah. Obviously Shakespeare. How many times have these shows been performed? Playing that and then adding or bringing something unique to the performance, getting away from not only what you think the general should be, but what everyone else has done. How do you make this a new way to tell a story that's been told over and over again? We've all seen Romeo and Juliet in many, many forms. That story has been told, not necessarily that it's Romeo and Juliet, but how do you tell that story in a fresh way as an actor? I think that's a great challenge.
DC, because I know you've played Albert Wesker, and as you said yourself, like, he's been played by other actors. How do you bring something unique to a
I'm just better than the other guys. So. No. Actually,
can you bring something different?
I've actually met them. Well, the thing is they don't want you to. At least because I did, when I first started, I've done 7 games, I think, for Resident Evil as Albert Wesker, but the first one was Umbrella Chronicles. And so they wanted me to voice match Peter Jessup, who I know is an LA actor, and we have the same agency. Sweetheart of a guy, and super talented. So, and he did a thing with like marbles in his mouth, is the only way I can describe it. And so trying to match that for Umbrella, and I think I'm horrible in that first video game, but apparently Capcom didn't, and so then they had me back for Resident Evil 5, and so I brushed up on my Peter Jessup, and I went in there, and then they played Richard Waugh. And they said, so you voice match Richard Waugh for this, but now you're going to be evolving as well. So then and of course, I can't not be me, there's always going to be elements of me in my voice and performance and whatnot. So there's already a change, an alchemy change. But so if anything, I blended both of those 2 performances. Then my character has injected himself with some stuff. I don't know if you guys know it or not, but I can't even say it. Anyway, and he basically becomes an insane monster. So at that point, I'm like, now I get to merge it more to what I want to do. Then, speaking of fan service, I actually did literal videos for the fans of it, because I've never had so many fans before. And so I started, and I was an editor for 10 years as well. I did my own film shorts and whatnot. So I started making these little things for the fans and doing Albert Wesker's voice. And so it's evolved over these years. And then when I would go into new games, I'm like going, this is how I'm doing Albert Wesker now. And they're like, everyone, now I own it. I shouldn't say own it, but you know what I'm saying. I feel it myself. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question, but I felt like I talked a lot, so that was.
That's good. No, that's good. It's filling the air. It's filling the air. It's filling the air. Anybody else? Any questions? Oh, got one there. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Kamal from Belgium.
Hey!
Hello. I have two short questions. One for maybe the anime part of it. Did you have the opportunity to meet your colleagues from other foreign languages? And do you know like a code from another language?
Oh, you mean like the original Japanese actors?
Maybe, or I don't know, or German or French, or I don't know.
Right. I've never met the actors, but I did get to meet, because I also directed a lot of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! I got to meet the Japanese director of Yu-Gi-Oh! He came to watch, we just recently did the new movie, last year we did the movie Dark Side of Dimensions, and so he came in to watch me dub as Kaiba. And it was great because, you know, those guys get to record prelay. They get to record first and then, right? But I have to now match the lip flap. So I did the movie in a 3-hour session, and he comes up to me afterwards, and, you know, it's all very protocol, that sort of stuff, and says, your counterpart took 3 days to record what you did in 3 hours. And I was like, I'm not going to say. So I got to meet my director counterpart, but not my actor. I want to go to Japan, but I'm not famous there.
I think it's a funny question you ask because you come from a country that doesn't have its own language. No, I'm kidding.
Belgium is a little bit complicated, you know, they have like two languages and, you know, it's complicated.
I'm still playing with you, I'm sorry. I've not met any counterparts, but I did get to hear, I do a cartoon called Transformers Rescue Bots. I think that's out here, right? And so I got to hear the German version of it, which was very funny. But now there's, you know, we did our 4 seasons. Now there's a new iteration of the show, but they went non-union and with New York actors, and they're doing the animation in this country now, and so they've replaced all of our voices. So that'll be interesting to see who's. But that's kind of cool. Is that some guy in New York has to impersonate me, so I'll be interested to see how they do.
And the other question was for you, Seth. Did you have the opportunity to hear your, I don't know, French, German voice, other language? I don't know. I know the French voice, but
yeah, I've not heard the French voice. I've heard it in Spanish. It sounds a lot more impassioned than I do. It's like I want this guy's passion. I need this, you know. So it was a little unnerving. But I haven't heard any other languages. I'd be interested to hear what they sound like.
I bet that's really weird, seeing your face with someone else's voice.
It was. So... It was. At first I was envious of how husky his voice was.
But did you feel violated at all?
No. Because whoever they got to do this thing he was feeling it. And I was like, you know, I should take some acting lessons from this guy or something. It was it was cool. I mean, if it would have been, you know, slack or shitty, then
right.
I probably would have felt violated.
Right.
I probably would have felt like, well, I can fucking do that. Just give me, give me 2 weeks.
Give me the finesse.
I could get up there and suck. You know, but
in any language.
But no, this guy he was really good. So yeah, I found myself taking notes.
What was it for? Was it for Walking Dead or was it for Starship Troopers?
No, this was for The Wire.
Oh, cool.
This was for The Wire.
Nice. Okay. We've another one that's back.
Just wanted to find out from the anime guys, is anime something you stumbled across or fell into in an acting world, or is it something you strove to become?
You want to start?
Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
I asked you.
You know what's funny is because actors we're always looking for work, right? It's when we're not working we always go from job to job to job. We're journeymans. That's the nature of it. And so and in the voiceover world, anime, union anime, any kind of dubbing pays the lowest of all the types of jobs that you can get voiceover wise. So I stumbled into it because I used to be part of a Walla group. And they said, we've got this thing, and I didn't even know if they called it anime then. They just said this Japanese cartoon, because this was like the late 90s or something. And I went in and I did what seemed to be like, 3 4-hour sessions for this thing. And I got, this is the longest movie in the world. And then a year later they called and they said, we need you to come back for season 2. And I go, season? It was a TV show? I didn't know, because it didn't pay like a TV series and I was a lead on. So I said, no, because at that point I started a home booth, and I was, I could do like a hardware commercial for somebody in Oklahoma and make more than I would in that time, and I just said no. I was telling Kira this, that so years go by, and so 2010 I'm like at one of my first cons, and I'm hearing about all these conventions, and I'm going, how come I don't get invited to more conventions? I had just done the Resident Evil, and that's why I was at this anime con. And they said, well, you have no anime credits. And I'm like going, anime? Oh, that thing that I didn't, and so then I reached out to all the anime directors and said, I'm willing to do anime again. I am. So finally I'm getting more stuff in that world. So, but it's one of those things that, for me, it was just another way of making ends meet, like doing Walla and commercials or any kind of thing. So,
Kira, how about you?
I feel like I'm kind of the opposite of most actors that I hear from about this, in the sense that I knew that I wanted to do like anime and video games, and unfortunately, yeah, as DC just mentioned, anime does pay the lowest of other things. So, but when I got into it, I was like, I really want to do this, and I was a fan of that particular type of media at the time, and just thought it would be really cool. So I kind of knew specifically that I wanted to do that. And then now that I like work in that field a lot, I'm like, this is really cool, but I want to do like, commercials and stuff where I can make more money, so.
I'll try to give you the short version. So I started playing music from 8th grade. That was my passion. And I worked as a tennis pro during the summers. And one of the members said, we have a job opening at the recording studio that I own. Are you interested in working there? And I said, this is a great idea. That, of course, is exactly what I want to be doing. And so they hired me, and it was basically a voiceover studio. I was the coffee guy. I took the garbage out, and slowly went from that to being the production assistant. Then I was a casting director. Then I was the in-house producer, so I produced a lot of the commercials that were there. And then I ran the studio for 10 years. And while I was doing that, I was pursuing music. And I would step in and read with actors when people didn't show up for casting sessions, and slowly but surely the clients would say, we like the last guy, but he didn't say his name at the end, we want to use him, and that was me. And at that point I was offered a big rock tour to go on, and I thought, what can I do from anywhere? I could be a voice actor, as long as I could have a microphone and find a studio. So I went out on tour. I contacted one of the agents that I had been working with and said, I want to do this, and they were like, great. They signed me, and then I went on tour, did voice acting that way, commercials mostly, and then for kids, which did all the Pokemon stuff like that, I was directing myself on a lot of these sort of series as well. They said, we'd like to hire you as a director. Would you come in here and direct Yu-Gi-Oh? So anime was something I grew up watching. Battle of the Planets was my favorite show. Casey Kasem played Mark from G-Force. That was what I watched as a kid in 5th and 6th grade. But I didn't think I was going to do cartoon voiceovers or voiceovers in general. But I do audiobooks, and anything that involves voice is what I do, and it made sense as a singer. Singing and pitch and inflection are the same thing. So it just made sense. So I fell into it. And of course, that's now, I'm humbled by the fact that people actually want to meet me and get my autograph and things for these shows. I'm very proud of them, but that was not my passion growing up at all. But it's become, that's my source of income. And yes, the union stuff, it's funny. The union stuff with anime pays the littlest bit, but with shows like Pokemon and things like that, we all did films. We did major motion pictures, which, thank goodness I bought my house with that, so this has been, a blessing.
It's a cartoon house.
Yes.
But
it's two-dimensional. There's a door. You go in, and if you run into it, it'll fall over.
You probably got some of the roles that DC refused because he wanted to do hardware commercials.
No. We're different coast people.
Old school anime. The first show was Slayers. If you know the series Slayers, I played Gowry on Slayers. That was my first recurring role in anime. So there it is. That's old school. I think they still drew that with their hands.
We got one at the back there.
Hi, how you doing? I'm Claire. My show is the Nerdy Girly Wordy Show on Dublin City FM. I have a question about how when you go into the booth to create your characters, you don't have, say, costume, makeup, and set to help you create characters.
Right.
How do you do anything? Do you have any little props? And I suppose the flip side of that then would be for Seth. When you are dealing with costume and set and prosthetics and things that might be uncomfortable as an actor, So like no props, no costume. The other, you know, how do you work that as you know, to bring the character to life?
Why don't you take that one first?
Yeah, I'm not one of those actors who tries to have any real influence over what the costume is going to be or what the look is going to be. I know some actors are very protective of that, but I feel very much like it's a collaboration, and it's up to me to make it, as long as whatever I'm wearing fits, it's up to me to make it work. The costume that I have for The Walking Dead is exceedingly uncomfortable. The last couple of episodes that I had to do, I had to wear these contact lenses, which were exceedingly uncomfortable.
Oh, spoiler alert.
Yeah, they're, you know, you can see them. They came out like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Oh.
But it was trying to, I guess if I were to fight against what somebody is trying to give me to work with, then I'm not being open to the material as fully as I could be. And there's something about dressing up. It's one of the first things I remember doing when I was a young boy, is, you know, when it's dressing up and doing my impersonations of The Godfather and everything else for my family, you know, and I would stick the oranges in my mouth, and I would have all my little props and my little pillow to accentuate my belly and all that kind of stuff. So whenever I get on a set and I get into costume, it throws me back to the playfulness, the childlike wonder of what it's like to be an actor. And I'm always grateful for it. I don't know that I could work in a vacuum at this point. I don't know that I could go to work in my underwear.
Well, you know, there's two sides of at least with the cartoon stuff. For me, is I'm either presented with the visual. Sometimes they'll play the original voice if it's Japanese, and of course cultures are different in terms of what we think is funny, what we think, like for instance, the Japanese might have a character that's named Tiny, right? And he's got a big voice like this, and that's, you know, or here, you know, Tiny might be the big fat guy, and he has a high voice. So it's like, you know, you go against the type that they might have originally done. But then also with things that are sort of prelay, where we record the voices first, we're given sides where we might see a drawing of the character and a little description of what they're about. So we have something to go on. But I'll give you an example of the show Kirby. I don't know if you ever saw Kirby. Okay, but I play the Meta Knight, which is a Spanish Antonio Banderas type of character, and he has no lip flap. He's just a helmet, right? You don't see his face at all. And so they brought me in and they said, Eric, we want you to play this like a Clint Eastwood type thing because we know you can do that. And I said, it's going to sound too much like Kaiba. That's what I'm doing on Yu-Gi-Oh! And they're like, oh, okay. I said, well, what if he's Antonio Banderas? And they said, Spanish? I said, yeah. And they said, why would he be Spanish? And I said, why wouldn't he be? And they said, all right, that's a good idea. Now, this wasn't on the sides. This was just a suggestion, because I thought, you know, if I was going to do it sexy like this, no, it would be very good. No, yes, yes. So I did it like that, and there was no lip flap. So I could take big pauses and say things like this, because there was no lip flap. And so years later, I'm at a convention in Miami, Florida. And this group of young guys come up to me and they say, did you play Meta Knight back in the day on Kirby? I'm like, yeah. We just want to thank you for that was the only character on Saturday mornings that sounded like us, that didn't make fun of us. And I didn't even think of it that way. But you know, there's so many stereotypes that we have in these kinds of shows, and because things don't sort of follow through in terms of different cultures. There's some very, there's a character called called Jinx on Pokemon, which is basically blackface. We wouldn't air it in America. We're like, we can't air that. This character cannot be on our show. And they were like, what are you talking about? The Japanese were like, what are you talking about? Because that was not racist to them. It was racist to us. So the fact that I played a Spanish character that was cool was my idea, but it was off of a, you know, just I pulled it out of my own experience of that's as cool as Clint Eastwood, and maybe even cooler.
A lot of times having any kind of visuals helps, because you know, if I'm going into audition for a game or something, a lot of times we're not going to see anything. Sometimes we will hear the original voice for reference, sometimes we won't if it's just an audition, so having a picture is very helpful. I've worked on games as well where they say you don't have to match the original, but sometimes just hearing it, especially just to see like how big they're going, a lot of times for like fight efforts and stuff like that, they want us to hear it so that we can match like timing and intensity and stuff like that. And I don't know, I like to look at, obviously we're not playing off the other actors, but I like to look at the lines that come before mine in the script so I can know what I'm reacting to. You know, they say that acting is reacting, and I think that's very true because, you know, how I'm responding to someone else, it's, you can't do it in a vacuum, essentially.
DC, how about you?
I just let the drug that I've taken that day dictate the character. So
Good that you ended with it.
it's timed out well for me, you know.
Like some really good mescaline that'll like that'll really drain you out. Yeah. You're really like some ether as well. Like get a nice hanky of ether and just take off. Oh, they're here. Okay, I think that's that about do it. We've any final questions from the crowd? Graham. Oh, why no? Okay. Do you want to do them?
You can go first.
Make it quick.
Yeah. Okay. So you all are part of very passionate projects, from live action to video game and that. What's been the biggest experience from that, from fans? Like the most impactful fan you've met?
It was an orgy, and it was.
I started with
I'm
this.
sorry, I ruined it. I'm sorry. It's supposed to be the button. I forgot. I'm sorry.
I used to, I still do. I try to answer all fan mail. It just takes me a little bit of time, but I you know, even before like Facebook and stuff like that, with just basic email, I would try to answer all the fan mail because I know I'm a fan myself of many things, and I know what that means. So I was at a convention, and this young woman came up to me, and she was probably in her early 30s, and she said, "You don't remember me, but when I was in 5th grade, I wrote you an interview, a series of questions, and I didn't think you would respond, but you did, and I had just changed schools, and I had no friends, and I thought if I could get someone like you to do my class paper, it would get me friends." And I was like, wow, she said, so you answered the questions, I read it in class, and I got it, and I got a good grade on it, but then everyone thought I was really cool because I knew you. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And she said, yeah, and it changed my life in that school. And she said, and I brought the paper if you would sign it for me.
Oh.
And I was floored. I mean, you know, we joke around about the fact that we work on this kind of stuff. But it is definitely humbling when you see that, you know, sometimes we are their friends. You know, I had that growing up. I was, you know, only child. My mom was a single mom, and I was in front of that television. If I had a chance to meet some of those people I grew up watching, that would have been, I mean, you know, Adam West was a friend of mine by watching him on television. You know, that I'm looking at Batman there. It's like things like that. So never take that for granted. So that's like one of many stories like that. I feel like we make a difference sometimes where we don't realize that we do. So that meant a lot to me.
Seth, how about you?
I've had people come up to me who want me to marry them.
Sorry, that was just the first time I met you.
It's legal in Ireland, so here you go.
Well, there we go. It's all about the 21st century, yeah. So I've gotten that, and I've actually thought about going online and becoming ordained and seeing what it would be like to marry some fans. But yeah, people have. I've had this one couple in particular who invited me to their ranch in Texas, and they were willing to fly me out and my family out. They were willing to put me up. They wanted to pay me. They wanted to do all of this stuff just so that they could have Father Gabriel officiate their wedding. And it's like, that's strange, but okay. No, I did not do it. I think I may have reported them to the local authorities. No, I didn't do it because we have yet to really to really deal with God on the show. And it seems to me I would kind of be jumping the shark if if we didn't have something like that on the show first. If Father Gabriel was joining people together, in a union under the eyes of God on the show, then perhaps I could feel like there was a little bit more leeway for me to do that off camera. But until that happens, I feel like I would just be kind of doing something kind of unholy.
That's very responsible to the character. I'm impressed with that. Yeah, I think that's commendable. That's right.
DC and Kira, any thoughts?
Well, I can say that Nier Automata fans have just been so incredible. Like, I am blown away because I worked on a lot of projects, but nothing has even come close to a fraction of what I've gotten from this game and how devoted the fan base is and the things that they've done for the cast. They've sent us gifts, they wrote us really heartfelt letters, they made us stuff. It's incredible, and people, I think the reason isn't necessarily because of our performances, it's because the game touched them in a very emotional way. It's a game that the creator isn't afraid to break the players' hearts and make them question everything about life and cry a lot. So, I think this people really connected emotionally with the characters, and so they kind of see us as an extension of that and say, it's amazing just the stuff that we've gotten.
I think that's what it is. It's like we were like goodwill representatives or something, the custodians of that, and so that has probably been the most amazing thing about the fan stuff, is that realizing that I'm just representing something, and that little gestures that I do have an impact in their lives in such a positive way. That's kind of it's awe-inspiring. So even though I'll still go bash Trump and cuss and whatnot on my Twitter feed, it's at least still being real, being who I am, but also knowing that a kind gesture of just having a bad day or what have you, or saying something suicidal, maybe it's just to get my attention on Twitter, but then tweeting something back about, just keeping support or, believing in yourself and seeking help or what have you, that not only helps them, all the other fans that see that too, then it kind of reverberates with them as well. And it's like, and I'm just, again, it's not DC Douglas did something, it's just, I'm the representative of Albert Wesker or Legion from Mass Effect or something like that. And that is kind of mind-blowing and cool. Yeah.
Final question.
Yes.
And in anime and in voice acting, you always know that there's only a specific amount of episodes, and either it goes on or doesn't, it kind of depends on the audience. So I'm just kind of wondering, do you get attached to a character and you get really sad to see them go, or actually sad for the show itself?
I was very attached to playing Dr. Deaton and being on Teen Wolf. Selfishly, it kept me young, working with all those young actors. It would remind me of the excitement of acting, just how exciting acting is as a profession, and the possibilities of it. They have yet to, at least at that point, they had yet to really be beaten down by the industry and to become jaded and dark and cynical. So it was great for me to be able to go into that environment and try to shed my own cynicism and shed my own whatever heartbreak may have happened over not getting cast in something because I wasn't tall enough or dark enough or light enough or whatever the fuck enough. Tell him. So the show helped to keep me young, and I miss having that in my life, actually.
Obviously, working on a show like Pokemon and being on it for 10 years and helping sort of create this monster that it is, this pocket monster.
I get it.
I definitely was disappointed that I didn't continue playing those characters, but I also feel like I established those characters, and to be part of sort of pop culture history is pretty cool. I do like that part of it, but like anything, it can't go on forever. I was really happy that Kaiba is still, I get to play Kaiba anytime he's needed, which is great. But as I said, these are things that, you know, the stories are going to end, or maybe they don't end. I mean, we never thought we'd come back together and do anything that was the original cast of Yu-Gi-Oh! That was 15 years ago, right? Or 17 years ago, I didn't even know. But they were like, by the way, we're bringing you all back because it's the most popular story arc with the fans, and we're going to make a feature film. Because for years they said, they're not doing it anymore. It's done. It's done. They don't want to talk about Kaiba anymore. No, it's done. It's done. And then, of course, the entire movie's about Kaiba, right? So, you know, you're sitting at home going, oh, I have little action figures of Brock and James and Kaiba that sit on my mixing board at home. And they're there with me. They hang out with me. I've got all the swag and stuff like that. I call it my wall of shame. It's got all the movie posters, stuff like that. But it's like, you know, and I'll end with this. There's a great song by Squeeze, a band from the 80s, called If I Didn't Love You, I'd Hate You. And this is my new mantra. There's a line in that song that says, singles remind me of kisses, albums remind me of plans. We make these plans that never end up the way we think they're going to end up, right? You could be the most responsible person in the world and say, I'm going to be doing this thing for the rest, and it's just going to, it never works out that way, good or bad. So we need to start focusing on the kisses, which are the moments today, right? Enjoy the moment, because it might not be there tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that that's a negative. If we're always stressing about what's not going to be there tomorrow, we don't enjoy the moment. So that's just something to think about.
Eric will also have a kissing booth on the
All right, I think we'll leave it there. So, guys, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.